What if the one person who looked down on you had to watch you rise higher than they ever imagined? That question hit me like a punch to the gut the moment I opened the thick ivory envelope resting on my kitchen counter. It had no return address, no branding, just an expensive weight, the kind that makes you pause. The name embossed in gold script across the front was unmistakable. I hadn't heard from Jason in years. Last I knew, he was riding high in finance, living off trust funds and gym selfies. Emily? She was the dream girl from college, brilliant, kind, and way out of my league. I'd only spoken to her twice back then. Once when I handed her a dropped pencil in Econ 204. The other when Jason told me to know my place after catching me glancing at her too long across the quad. Now they were getting married. And for some unfathomable reason, they wanted me there. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The wedding was in 2 weeks. A black tie affair at some estate in upstate New York that sounded more like a country club than a venue. I laughed when I saw the details. Then, I read the postscript scribbled in Jason's handwriting at the bottom. Alex, would be good to see you again. Hope life's been treating you okay. Okay. He hoped I was okay? I stood in my modest apartment, still wearing yesterday's t-shirt, half-eaten ramen on the counter, and student loan bills stacked on the fridge. Yeah, Jason, life's been just peachy. It wasn't the invitation that bothered me. It was the smugness I imagined on his face as he mailed it. The assumption that I'd show up alone, maybe in an off-the-rack suit, eyes wide in awe at his luxury lifestyle, his perfect wife, his perfect everything. But the thing was, I wasn't the same Alex he used to mock in college. Not anymore. It was our senior year. A frat house party. Jason stood on the deck, drink in hand, arm around Emily, holding court like he always did. I'd just gotten rejected from my 3rd internship and wandered out for some air. He saw me, smirked, and called out so everyone could hear. Still trying to make it big, Lex? Maybe you should try working the coat check. Might suit you better. Laughter erupted around him. Emily looked away. I never forgot the way that felt, like being stepped on with polished shoes. I held the invitation for a long minute, then dropped it on the counter like it had burned me. I wasn't going to go. That was clear. Why subject myself to that circus? But something gnawed at me. I thought of all the hours I'd put in since college. Starting from scratch. Freelance projects. Late nights learning code, pitching startups. No handouts. No family name to lean on. I had built something. Not flashy, not finished, but real. And maybe, just maybe, it was time Jason Whitmore saw that. I called my best friend Marcus. You're not seriously thinking about going to that wedding, right? He asked, half laughing, half horrified. I'm just saying, it could be interesting. He paused. Alex, the last time you were around that guy, you nearly dropped out of school. I know, but I'm not that guy anymore. And I don't want to show up just to prove a point. I want to close the loop. Marcus sighed. Fine, but you're not going alone. That's when the idea hit. Sophia. We'd met 2 months ago at a tech panel in Chicago. She was speaking on women in venture capital, sharp, magnetic, unapologetically confident. Afterward, we grabbed coffee and talked for 3 hours. We stayed in touch, mostly messaging articles and exchanging thoughts on the industry. There was something about her. She didn't just walk into a room, she owned it. Not in an arrogant way, but in that effortless way that made people stop mid-sentence. I picked up my phone and texted. Hey, wild idea. Want to crash a wedding with me next weekend? Black tie. Fancy. Dramatic. I promise open bar and passive-aggressive toasts. Seconds later, she replied. I'm in. I have a gown that deserves to be seen. Who's getting married? Long story. Ex-bully. And someone I used to think I loved. Even better. Send me the details. I'll book my flight. I exhaled. This was actually happening. Suddenly, I wasn't just attending a wedding. I was about to walk into Jason Whitmore's palace with a woman who could upstage a royal. Not for revenge. Not for petty pride. But to remind myself, and maybe him, that the past didn't define me anymore. The camera cuts back to me, present day, standing in front of the estate gates. My hands tightened around the steering wheel as Sophia adjusted her earrings beside me, her reflection fierce in the side mirror. "You ready?" she asked with a sly smile. I looked out at the sprawling mansion and the fleet of luxury cars ahead. "Not really," I said. "But maybe that's the point." We stepped out of the car together. Let the games begin. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Most people assume success is a straight line. Work hard, get results. But if life taught me anything, it's that the line is messy, broken, and filled with detours you didn't ask for. I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment above a laundromat in a suburb nobody brags about. My mom worked double shifts as a nurse, barely making rent, and still somehow managing to pack me lunch with notes like, "Proud of you. Keep going." She was the first woman I ever looked up to and the last person who ever let me feel sorry for myself. My dad? He left when I was 7. No note. Just a hollow space where his voice used to be. After that, it was just me, Mom, and my older brother, Daniel. Daniel was the golden boy. Star quarterback, full scholarship, charm that could sell anything. But even charm has its limits when addiction walks through the door. He got into pills in his junior year. First, it was to take the edge off. Then it was arrests, rehab, relapse on loop. I was 15 when I found him unconscious on our bathroom floor. That was the moment I stopped believing anyone was coming to save us. I wasn't the smartest guy in the room. Hell, I wasn't even in the room most of the time. I didn't have connections or legacy admissions. I had a refurbished laptop, YouTube tutorials, and a hunger that wouldn't let me sleep. At night, after homework, I taught myself how to code. Built apps nobody used. Crashed more hard drives than I could afford. But I kept going. By the time college application season rolled around, I had a portfolio that didn't look half bad. It wasn't fancy, but it was real. It got me into Eastbridge University on a partial academic grant and a whole lot of hustle. That's where I met Jason Whitmore. It was orientation week. I remember because the weather was disgusting humid, sticky, the kind of heat that makes your shirt cling to your back. I was walking across campus with a busted rolling suitcase when a black Escalade pulled up next to me. Out stepped Jason, crisp polo, perfect smile, and that overconfident walk like he already owned the place. He didn't even look at me. He looked through me. Later that night, we ended up at the same mixer. Jason was holding court again, surrounded by guys in boat shoes and girls in sundresses. I stood near the snacks, pretending to text someone. That's when Emily approached. She didn't belong with Jason, not in the fairy tale sense. She was grounded, bookish in a way that was magnetic. She had this calm curiosity that made you want to lean in. She asked me about my major, smiled when I told her about the app one was building. For 5 minutes, I felt like I was being seen. Until Jason walked over, draped an arm over her shoulder, and asked, loud enough for the whole room to hear, "Hey, you interviewing interns or just being polite?" Emily looked mortified. I mumbled something and left the party early. That night was one of dozens like it. Jason made it his hobby to remind me where he thought I stood. Second class. Background character. A name on the attendance sheet. He wasn't just a bully. He was a reminder of every room I wasn't invited into. But I didn't stop. While he partied, I learned. While he mocked, I coded. I graduated with honors, scraped together enough to launch my first startup, which failed, gloriously, but it taught me how to pivot, build better, and keep moving. I watched others rocket past me, but I played the long game. 5 years later, I'm not rich, not famous. But I own a small dev firm. I have clients. My name is on contracts, not just invoices. I sleep better at night. Most days. My brother's story didn't end in that bathroom. After his third rehab stint, he got clean. Now he runs a community gym, speaks at youth centers, and helps kids avoid the cliff he nearly fell off. He called me the night I told him about the wedding. "You're going?" he asked, half chuckling. "I think I have to," I replied. To rub it in his face? I paused. No. To remind myself who I've become. He was quiet for a second. "Just don't let that old pain rewrite the new you. You've worked too hard to carry dead weight." I knew he was right. This wasn't about Jason. It was about letting go of the shame I didn't even realize I was still holding. That night, I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. I wasn't in a penthouse. I wasn't driving a Tesla or flying first class. But I'd made peace with my past. Mostly. I could look myself in the eye and know every inch of progress was earned. And now I had a chance to walk back into that world, not as a victim, not as someone begging for validation, but as a man who brought something real to the table. I didn't need to be the loudest or the richest. I just had to show up. And maybe bring the right +1. There's something surreal about seeing your past dressed in designer tuxedos. The wedding weekend had officially begun. Sophia and I had just checked into the Chateau Worthington, a restored estate turned luxury venue about 90 minutes outside the city. White stone columns. Manicured gardens. The kind of place that looks like it only exists in movies where everyone speaks with a British accent. The rehearsal dinner was that night, a casual gathering on the terrace. And by casual, they meant champagne fountains, oysters, and valet parking for people who probably arrived in private helicopters. I hadn't seen Jason yet, but I felt his presence the second we stepped onto the terrace. His laugh cut through the air like a blade, sharp, confident, rehearsed. Then I saw him. Still tall. Still Hollywood handsome. That perfect chin, that slicked back hair, the tailored tux that probably cost more than my rent for the year. But something was off this time. Maybe it was the way his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Or how he kept glancing around, like waiting for a camera to capture the moment. He looked like a man who'd built his identity on applause and now needed it to breathe. His eyes locked on mine across the crowd. And for a second, neither of us moved. "Alex freaking Turner," Jason said as he walked over, arms out like we were old friends. "Man, look at you. Still rocking that underdog charm." "Hey Jason," I said, keeping my voice even. "Thanks for the invite." He leaned in for a backpat hug. His cologne hit me first, something expensive and unnecessarily aggressive. "You clean up better than I expected," he added with a wink. I laughed lightly. "I get that a lot." Then Sophia stepped forward. Jason turned and paused. She wore a deep emerald dress with an open back and simple gold jewelry. Classic. Powerful. Effortless. He blinked, visibly recalibrating. "And who is this?" "Sophia," she said, offering her hand. +1. Surprise. Jason hesitated just long enough to make it awkward, then shook her hand. "Well, damn. Guess you've been busy, Alex." "You could say that," I replied. He smiled, but his eyes narrowed, as if trying to place her. "You look familiar." Sophia's smile didn't flicker. "I get that a lot too." The evening rolled on with forced laughter and practice stories. Jason did what he always did, held the spotlight. Toasted himself. Made jokes at other people's expense. Half the crowd laughed like it was their job. I watched him closely. There was a desperation there, just beneath the surface. Like he was trying to prove something not just to us, but to himself. Emily joined us briefly, her posture perfect, but her eyes distant. She wore the kind of expensive gown you'd expect from a future hedge fund wife. Her hair was up, her smile was fixed. But there was something hollow behind it. When Jason stepped away for more wine, she turned to Sophia. "I love your dress," she said politely. Sophia smiled. "Thank you. Yours too. Beautiful cut." Emily glanced at me. So, how do you two know each other? Tech conference in Chicago, Sophia said. Alex was on a panel. I was in the audience. He made a good impression. I almost choked on my drink. Emily smiled, but there was a flicker of something behind her eyes. Regret? Recognition? I couldn't tell. Jason returned, clapping his hands. Okay, everyone, let's toast to the weekend. To love, money, and marrying up. People laughed. Emily didn't. Later, after a few too many glasses of wine, Jason stood again, this time with a glass of something dark in hand and a glint in his eye that made me brace myself. This next toast, he said, voice booming across the terrace, goes to all of us who started at the top and managed to stay there. Scattered chuckles. And to the rest, hey, sometimes just getting an invite is a win, right? His eyes locked on me. I felt every stare turn my way. Sophia reached under the table and gently touched my knee. I smiled calmly, raised my glass, and said, to those who built their seat at the table with no handouts. Now that got some genuine laughter. Jason's smile twitched. Game on. Later that night, Sophia and I returned to our suite. I dropped onto the velvet couch, loosened my tie, and stared at the ceiling. Well, I said, that could have gone worse. You held your own, Sophia replied, unzipping her dress with the ease of someone who'd walked red carpets and boardrooms alike. He expected you to shrink. You didn't. I looked at her. You think he recognized you? She shrugged. Not yet. But he will. That made me sit up. What do you mean? She smiled slightly. Let's just say, Jason and I have some history. I blinked. Wait, are you serious? Sophia nodded. Different city, different scene. Years ago. He doesn't remember, but I do. And no, it's not romantic. Is this a revenge thing? No, she said, walking over and sitting beside me. It's a clarity thing. For both of us. I didn't press further. Because for the first time in years, I didn't feel like the underdog anymore. The wedding day arrived like a scene out of a dream or a high-budget romantic drama set in the Hamptons. The sun was just rising over the hills of the Worthington estate, casting a golden sheen on the stone buildings and pristine grounds. Staff buzzed through the halls like a Broadway stage crew prepping for opening night. You could feel the tension in the air, the pressure for perfection. I stood on the balcony of our suite, sipping hotel coffee and trying to convince myself this was just another Saturday. But it wasn't. This was his day. His spectacle. His moment to remind everyone that Jason Whitmore had won again. Wealth, power, the dream bride. It was all there, neatly wrapped in monogrammed napkins and hand-picked floral arrangements. But this time, I wasn't here to applaud. Sophia emerged from the bathroom in silk lounge pants and a cup of her own, though hers was espresso, naturally. You slept, she asked, raising an eyebrow. Barely. Too much on my mind. You were spiraling, she said, sitting down across from me. The overthinking? Loud sighs? Staring at the ceiling like it was plotting against you. Okay, Freud, I muttered, smiling. Maybe. She leaned forward. Today's just a performance, Alex. One you don't have to direct, act in, or even clap for. You just show up, breathe, and watch the script unfold. I nodded, more grateful than I could say for her presence. She made everything feel lighter. How do you do it? I asked. Stay so calm in rooms designed to make you feel small? She thought for a second. I remind myself that power isn't how loud someone talks. It's how still you remain when they do. That line stuck with me. Would stick with me for a long time. A few hours later, as the guests began arriving in black limousines and champagne was served in crystal flutes on silver trays, I caught a glimpse of Jason from across the courtyard. He stood on the grand staircase of the estate in a custom white tuxedo, flanked by his groomsmen, each one trying just a little too hard to match his effortless arrogance. A photographer circled him like a vulture, snapping endless shots as he adjusted his cufflinks and posed like a man born into a Rolex ad. Emily was nowhere to be seen yet. You'd think he was marrying himself, Sophia muttered beside me. You're not wrong. Jason spotted us and gave a half wave. It wasn't a greeting, it was a declaration. A subtle, smirking signal to everyone around him. Check out what I've done. Who I've become. Sophia gave a lazy smile in return and sipped her drink like she was born for moments like these. And, just like that, eyes began turning. Not toward Jason, but toward her. When we walked into the ceremony garden 30 minutes later, every head turned. Sophia wore a midnight blue gown with a high slit and open shoulders, elegant, striking, and just bold enough to make the mother of the bride blink twice. Her hair was swept into a low bun, diamond earrings sparkling under the chandeliers strung between the oak trees. I'd worn the best tux I could afford, tailored and classic. Standing next to her, I didn't feel like the underdog anymore. We didn't just walk in, we arrived. People whispered. Some nodded politely. A few asked who she was. One woman even mistook her for someone famous. Jason stared. He didn't wave this time. After we found our seats, one of Jason's groomsmen approached. Hey, man, Alex, right? He said, squinting like I was a trivia question. You were in Jason's dorm, weren't you? Briefly, I replied. I remember you, he said. You used to hang around the edges. Not anymore, Sophia cut in smoothly, smiling. These days, he owns the room. The guy blinked, nodded slowly, and backed away. I turned to her. That wasn't subtle. Neither is your past, she replied. Sometimes you have to reintroduce yourself. As the string quartet began tuning, Emily finally emerged from the bridal suite. She looked stunning in a sleek, modern gown, veil trailing behind her like something out of a magazine. But her eyes found us, found me, and something in her expression flickered. Recognition? Memory? Regret? She gave a small nod and turned away. Jason, now standing at the altar, didn't even notice. While the ceremony began, a woman behind me whispered to her husband. Who's that with Alex? She's incredible. No idea, he replied. But she doesn't look like she belongs to Jason's crowd. She looks above it. I tried not to smile. When the vows were exchanged, poetic, overly rehearsed, and more about achievement than love, Sophia leaned closer and whispered, Is it just me, or does this feel like a merger agreement? I snorted. Corporate synergy with tax benefits. Exactly. Jason spoke his vows with that same camera-ready polish, while Emily's voice trembled just slightly, like her heart wasn't entirely present. And for a moment I wondered, what if the dream life Jason built wasn't quite what it looked like from the outside? They kissed. Cameras flashed. Applause thundered. But something hung in the air, just beneath the music and the flower petals and the champagne. A question. One I think more than a few people were asking quietly. If Jason Whitmore had it all, why did the most unforgettable person at his wedding arrive as someone else's plus one? Weddings are supposed to feel like closure. The kiss, the applause, the slow march down the aisle while everyone stands and smiles. But as Jason and Emily walked past me, something didn't feel closed. It felt suspended, like a performance wrapped in crystal and champagne, hiding a truth that hadn't been invited. Sophia must have felt it too. She leaned over as the crowd dispersed toward cocktail hour and whispered, I give it 6 months. 2, I replied. If he skips therapy. She laughed. But not loudly. There was tension in the air, tight, humming. Not obvious. Just a thread out of place in the otherwise perfect fabric. The cocktail hour was held in a side garden strung with fairy lights, live jazz, and waitstaff gliding through with hors d'oeuvres I couldn't pronounce. Jason was making his rounds, glowing with triumph. He had that bounce in his step, like he believed this day had finally sealed his legacy. And maybe it had, in the way a brand seals a product. But I noticed something the others didn't. Emily was nowhere to be seen. Not since the kiss. Not since the walk down the aisle. I was refilling my glass of sparkling water when I heard it, soft, hesitant, but unmistakable. Alex? I turned. And there she was. Emily. Hair still perfect. Dress still flawless. But her hands clutched the edge of a column like she needed it to stay upright. Hey, I said. You okay? She glanced around. I just needed a minute away from everything. Understandable. That was quite the show. She winced. I didn't mean it cruelly, but it hit her anyway. Can we walk? She asked. Sophia caught my eye from across the garden. I gave her a small nod. She gave me one back. Unbothered. Confident. Unshaken. So Emily and I walked. We moved through a side path, past a hedge wall, into a quiet part of the estate. The noise faded. The air cooled. The mask slipped. You look good, she said softly. You too, I replied. Though I always figured you'd end up in law school, not a designer gown. She smiled faintly. I figured the same, once. Silence. Then she said it. I didn't think you'd actually come. Why not? Because I knew Jason invited you for the wrong reasons. I looked at her, surprised. He didn't invite me to reconnect. He invited me to perform, I said flatly. I know. Her voice cracked a little. And then came the confession. Jason and I almost called it off 2 months ago. My breath caught. She went on. It wasn't cheating or anything dramatic. It was worse. It was silence. Emptiness. We stopped seeing each other. We became a partnership on paper. Then why go through with it? I asked quietly. Because of the money. The image. The pressure. His parents. Mine. The magazine spread. The vendors. The guests. I could see tears pushing against her lashes, fighting their way to the surface. And then I saw your name on the RSVP list, she whispered. And it shook something loose. I swallowed hard. Emily. I'm not saying I made a mistake, she interrupted. But maybe. I settled. Maybe we both did. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The wind moved through the trees like an exhale. Then she looked up at me. Do you remember that night at the mixer? Freshman year. I nodded slowly. I watched Jason humiliate you. And I did nothing. You weren't responsible. No. But I saw who he was. And I chose him anyway. I didn't know what to say to that. She stepped closer. I used to wonder what would have happened if I'd said something. If I'd walked over to you after. If I'd apologized. You don't have to now, I said gently. But it wasn't absolution she was asking for. It was release. And maybe a little honesty in return. Are you happy? She asked. The question hung there like fog. And the truth was, I wasn't sure. But I was proud of who I'd become. Of how far I'd come. Of the people in my life, especially the woman waiting for me back at the garden. I'm getting there, I said. Piece by piece. Emily nodded, eyes glassy. Good, she said. You deserve to be. Then, quietly, take care of her. Sophia, she nodded. I saw how she looks at you. It's real. I smiled. Yeah, it is. By the time we returned to the crowd, Jason was giving another toast. Of course he was. Glass in hand, spotlight perfectly placed, smile wide enough to show teeth but not vulnerability. I stood at the back of the crowd. Sophia found me, slipped her hand into mine without a word. Jason's voice carried over the music, to new beginnings and old friends. To the ones who stayed loyal. And to the ones who came back just in time to see the best version of me. Some laughter. Some confusion. He glanced at me. I didn't flinch. Because the best version of me wasn't standing under a spotlight. She was standing beside me, hand in mine, eyes locked forward. You can only fake forever for so long. And in Jason Whitmore's world, forever came with a time limit. One that ticked louder the closer the night drew to its end. The reception had moved inside, massive chandeliers, a string quartet now replaced by a DJ spinning modern pop over a floor waxed to a mirror sheen. Every table looked like it had been curated by royalty, gold-trimmed menus, embossed place cards, wine lists that read like foreign novels. Jason and Emily were introduced like celebrities, Mr. and Mrs. Jason Whitmore, to roaring applause. They danced their first dance, a waltz that felt more rehearsed than romantic. Eyes were on them, phones raised, filters on. But I was watching something else. Emily didn't look at Jason once during the dance. After dinner came the speeches. The best man's was loud, crude, and full of remember that time stories only the frat crowd found funny. Emily's maid of honor tried for sentiment, but mostly recited quotes from Pinterest. It was textbook. It was surface level. It was safe. Then Jason stood up again, his fourth speech of the weekend. "Before we bring out dessert," he announced, "I just want to say something from the heart." Sophia tensed beside me. Here it comes. Jason held the mic like a late-night host. "Tonight isn't just about love," he began. "It's about legacy. About building something that outlasts trends, gossip, or resentment." My eyes narrowed. "And if I'm being honest," he continued, "some people here tonight didn't come to celebrate. They came to inspect, to judge, maybe even to settle a score." A few heads turned toward us. Sophia stayed still, eyes calm. I didn't blink. Jason smiled, thin and smug. "But I want to thank them. Because without old rivals, we wouldn't recognize how far we've come." Polite applause. Tense smiles. But the room had shifted. People felt it. Jason had just called me out, without saying my name, and he looked proud of it. Sophia looked at me. He just turned his wedding into a press conference. I shook my head. He always needs a villain. "Are you going to respond?" "I already did, by showing up." She smiled slightly. "Good. Because the only thing more dangerous than an insecure man with money is one who thinks he's untouchable." We sat in silence for a beat. Then, "You want to dance?" she asked, standing. I blinked. "You serious?" "Why not? This is our stage now too." So we did. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't choreographed. It was real. We danced like people who didn't need to prove anything. People who weren't pretending. Sophia laughed loud and unfiltered, and I felt lighter than I had in years. People noticed. Some even whispered. Jason noticed too. And for once, he looked like the one on the outside looking in. After the dance, Sophia stepped away to get air. I moved toward the dessert bar. That's when I overheard them, two of Jason's groomsmen, near the bar, a little drunk, a little careless. "I'm just saying, he was texting Vanessa 3 weeks ago," one muttered. "Dude, SHHH. I'm serious." Right before the engagement party. And not about business either. Wasn't she the one from LA? Yup. The wellness coach. Emily would freak if she knew. I froze. That was the first thread. I turned, saw Emily across the room, sitting alone at her table, quietly pushing around a piece of cake with her fork. Her veil had come off. Her shoes were gone. Her smile was too tired to fake. Jason was nowhere near her. Sophia returned and saw my face. "What?" I told her what I'd heard. She didn't even flinch. Of course. Narcissists always self-destruct. All you have to do is not catch the pieces when they fall. But Emily, she made her choice. Doesn't mean she has to keep making it. It happened fast. I don't know if someone tipped her off, or if Emily overheard something, but suddenly, there was a commotion near the bridal table. Emily standing. Jason protesting. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut. Words like respect, humiliation, months of pretending. Jason trying to laugh it off, still acting for the crowd. But the crowd wasn't applauding. Phones were lowered. Faces were blank. Then she did it. She took off her ring, set it on the table, and walked straight out of the reception hall. No tears. No breakdown. Just done. Jason stood frozen. For once, no speech came to his lips. Someone clapped, awkwardly. Then someone else. It wasn't a celebration. It was a release. The mask had cracked, and people finally saw what was underneath. Sophia leaned in. Told you the second climax was coming. We left shortly after that. Quietly. No scene. No farewell. As we walked through the marble corridor, I glanced back once and saw Jason, still standing alone at the head table. Still wearing the tux. Still waiting for applause that never came. And then I turned back to Sophia. Thank you, I said. For what? For being the only thing real in a weekend full of fake. She smiled, laced her fingers with mine. Let's go home. The drive back from Worthington felt like shedding an old skin. It was still early, barely past noon the day after the wedding, but the estate had already begun its quiet dismantling. Staff packed up flower arrangements, vendors rolled out carts, and the illusion of perfection melted under the sun like butter on pavement. Sophia and I sat in silence most of the ride. Not awkward, not heavy, just quiet. The kind of silence that comes when there's nothing left to prove, and everything left to understand. Jason hadn't said goodbye. Not to me. Not to Sophia. Maybe not to anyone. After Emily left the reception, he vanished. Someone said he was holed up in the wine cellar for the rest of the night, refusing to come out, drinking expensive regret by the bottle. I didn't feel smug. I didn't feel vengeful. Mostly, I just felt relieved. Because the version of Jason I'd built up in my mind, the unbeatable, untouchable, golden boy villain, had turned out to be a guy playing a character he didn't know how to stop performing. And the show had closed early. By the time we got back to my apartment, the skyline felt different. Like I was seeing it through new eyes. Sophia kicked off her heels, dropped her overnight bag on my floor, and stretched like a cat who'd just returned from a safari. You want tea or a post-wedding cocktail? I asked. Tea, she said. Champagne only tastes good when it's earned. I grinned and headed to the kitchen. When I returned, she was flipping through a photo on her phone, one of us dancing, taken by some guest I didn't know. You look happy in that, she said. I was. You still are. I thought about it, then nodded. More than I've been in a long time. That night, my phone buzzed with 2 texts. One from Emily. Thank you for listening yesterday. I didn't know I needed to say those things until I did. I don't know what comes next, but I know I need to find out on my own. Take care of yourself, Alex. And of her. She's rare. And one from Jason. So I guess you got what you wanted. Congrats. I stared at his message for a long time. Then typed. What I wanted. I wanted the truth to catch up. You did the rest. And hit send. Later, Sophia curled up next to me on the couch, barefoot, no makeup, wearing one of my old college sweatshirts that somehow looked better on her than it ever did on me. You know what bugs me? She asked. What? People calling me your plus one. Like I'm the accessory. Well, I said, turning toward her, you kind of were the main character all weekend. She laughed. Yeah, but not because of the dress or the hair. It's because I didn't flinch. That's the difference. I nodded. It wasn't about showing off. It was about showing up. She smiled, leaned her head on my shoulder. I wasn't there to impress him, she said. I was there to remind you. Of what? That he never defined you. Not then. Not now. I let that sink in. And it settled somewhere deep, somewhere I hadn't felt strong in years. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I opened an old box from the back of my closet. Inside were things I'd buried, photos from college, journals from when I felt lost, even a crumpled note Emily had once written during a class, scribbled with, "You think too much. Just live." I stared at it for a moment. Then I smiled and threw it away. They say power corrupts, but maybe it just reveals. Jason didn't fall apart because I showed up. He fell apart because he'd spent years holding himself together with image and ego. And when the spotlight dimmed, when the guests saw past the glitter, he had nothing left to stand on. Meanwhile, I had everything I needed. Because real power isn't loud. It doesn't need a microphone or a tux or a monogrammed signature cocktail. Sometimes, real power walks in quietly, in a blue dress, with a calm smile, and leaves everyone speechless. A week later, Sophia and I were sitting at a rooftop bar in Brooklyn. Not fancy, not curated, just us. Streetlights below, wind in our hair, the world moving around us like it always had. "I think I'm ready," I said. "For what?" "To stop measuring myself against ghosts." She raised her glass. "To ghost festing." We clinked. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like the supporting character in my own life. I felt centered. Weddings are supposed to be the start of something. But for Jason, the day after felt more like an autopsy. He sat alone at the edge of the master's suite balcony, still wearing the undone tuxedo pants from the night before. The jacket lay crumpled over a velvet armchair. His phone buzzed, untouched. Emails, missed calls, headlines. Socialite bride walks out. Whitmore wedding ends in whisper, not applause. Even the press, who once fed off his charisma, now circled with questions. He poured another drink. Straight bourbon. 10 a.m. Emily hadn't called. She hadn't come back. Her things were gone before the sun rose, quietly packed and removed with surgical precision. Her parents left a terse voicemail on Jason's line. "We'll be in touch after we've spoken to Emily. We expect privacy until then." Even his own father had said it. "Next time you want to throw a circus, make sure the tent holds." Jason replayed the moment over and over. Her eyes, her words, that ring, sitting cold on the linen tablecloth. How had it all slipped? And worse, why didn't he feel shocked? Jason didn't believe in soul-searching. He believed in leverage, in optics, in keeping score. But now the scoreboard was blank. And in the echo chamber of his penthouse brain, one image wouldn't stop playing. Alex, standing quietly beside a woman who made heads turn without trying, dancing like he had nothing to prove. Speaking with calm, not confidence built from performance, but from truth. Jason hated how steady he looked. He hated more how unbothered he seemed. That wasn't the Alex he remembered. The one who'd always been on the fringe, fumbling for approval. The one Jason let sit at his table, back in college, just close enough to feel grateful but never equal. But that Alex was gone. This one didn't flinch. And that unsettled him more than he'd ever admit. Meanwhile, Emily stood in a third-floor walk-up in Brooklyn, barefoot on hardwood floors, a cup of black tea in her hand. It wasn't hers. It belonged to her cousin, who'd offered her the spare room with no questions asked. "Stay as long as you need," she'd said. Emily had never needed space before. She was the planner, the achiever, the one who had the 5-year roadmap laminated and color-coded. But standing here now, hair in a bun, no ring, no press handlers, no curated facade, she felt strangely light. For the first time in years, she wasn't playing a role. She drafted a message to Jason, deleted it, drafted another, deleted that too. What was there left to say? He hadn't asked for forgiveness. He hadn't denied the rumors. He hadn't reached out. And, honestly, if he did, it wouldn't change anything. Not now. Because Emily had seen it. Clearly. In Alex's eyes. In the way Sophia looked at him like she knew his worth, without needing anyone else to co-sign it. That's what Emily wanted for herself. That clarity. That kind of love. Not another shiny ring in a cold house with marble floors and empty rooms. Back in his condo, Jason finally opened one of the dozens of unopened messages. It was from a business partner. "Let me know when you're ready to talk. I heard about the reception. Some people are concerned." He tossed the phone onto the bed. People didn't care about the truth. They cared about the optics. And the optics said Jason Whitmore had finally lost control of the narrative. That thought used to terrify him. Now, he just felt tired. In a quiet diner downtown, Alex and Sophia ate pancakes and eggs like two people without an audience. No cameras. No catered menus. Just morning sun and the smell of butter. You know what I think, Sophia said, slicing into her short stack. Jason never thought you'd outgrow the version of you he kept in his head. Alex sipped his coffee. He needed me to stay small. It made his success look bigger. Well, she said, raising her fork, looks like someone's grown. He smiled. Yeah, and he's shrinking. That evening, Emily stood in front of a cracked mirror above her cousin's old dresser. She didn't flinch at her reflection. No makeup. Hair messy. Tank top and joggers. But her eyes? Still sharp. Still hers. And for the first time in a long while, they didn't ask for permission. She didn't know exactly what would come next. But she knew it wouldn't be quiet. Or apologetic. Because sometimes, walking out isn't the end of the story. Sometimes, it's the first time you're actually walking into your own life. There's a strange quiet that settles in after a public disaster. Not the loud kind, with screaming or sirens, but the eerie, slow silence of no one returning your calls. Jason sat at the edge of his sleek, too-clean kitchen, scrolling through headlines that no longer praised him. Publicists had gone dark. Investors had paused. The magazine shoot of New York's power couple was now conveniently on hold. But what really got to him? The way people didn't reach out. No one came to rescue him. No one asked for his side. Even the gossip blogs had already moved on to the next scandal, the next shine. Jason wasn't interesting anymore. He was done. Emily was finding comfort in small things, morning walks past street vendors, the rhythm of city buses, a handwritten to-do list taped beside her cousin's fridge. Nothing fancy, but nothing fake either. She'd started reading again novels, not business books. The kind with flawed heroines and messy endings. She even applied for a part-time copy editing job at a local indie publisher. The pay was low, the hours flexible. And for once, the job wasn't about positioning herself. It was about peace. And every morning, when she made coffee with oat milk instead of cream, she reminded herself, this is mine. This choice is mine. 3 days after the wedding, Emily opened the door to find a small package on the doormat. No name, no card. Inside, the wedding ring. And a note. You dropped this. Thought you might want to sell it or throw it into the river. Either works. Jay. She stared at it for a long time. Then took the ring to a consignment shop that afternoon. Got a price. Took the cash. Bought herself a second-hand bike and a pair of noise-canceling headphones. Because silence didn't have to be heavy. Sometimes it was healing. Alex had just stepped out of a morning meeting when his phone buzzed. A voicemail. From an unknown number. He played it on speaker, setting his phone on his desk. Alex, it's Jason. I don't expect a call back. But I thought maybe you want to know I'm stepping back from a few public things. Taking some time. Not that it matters. But if anyone asks, I didn't plan for any of this. I just didn't know how to stop it once it started. Click. Alex stared at the screen. Jason still hadn't figured it out. The apology wasn't for what happened. It was for what he chose to do. And what he chose to ignore. Later that afternoon, Alex got another voicemail, this time from a woman named Candace Strauss, executive editor at a national lifestyle magazine. Alex, we saw you at the Whitmore wedding, front row. You've been on our radar. If you're interested, we'd love a feature on your design firm. Not fluff, real storytelling. Your vision, your story. We'll send a writer. Let us know. He nearly laughed out loud. He wasn't even the groom. He was the +1's date. But here it was, an offer. Real attention. Real credibility. And it came after the moment he stopped chasing approval. He texted Sophia. Want to co-author a piece? She replied instantly. Only if I get final say on the title. That weekend, over drinks and laughter on Alex's tiny balcony, they brainstormed. Designing backwards, how simplicity outlasts spectacle. The +1 effect. What happens when you stop performing? Sophia tapped her glass. Here's what we call it: the real power couple at the Whitmore wedding. Alex raised his eyebrows. Bit bold, don't you think? She grinned. Exactly. We're not asking anymore. We're declaring. He looked at her, sunlight on her cheek, wind in her hair, and realized that the girl who walked into that wedding in a blue dress had left with more than silence. She left with his heart. Jason finally released a statement through his PR team, 3 sentences, hollow and lawyer-approved. After careful consideration, Emily and I have chosen to part ways privately. We ask for respect during this transition. We remain grateful for the support of friends and family. It was cold, predictable, clean, but behind the scenes he was alone. The condo felt cavernous, the wine cellar untouched, his reflection more honest than ever and far less interesting, because when no one's watching, you have to face the one person you've been avoiding: yourself. Emily got the editing job. She biked there each morning, headphones in, scarf tucked under her chin. She read manuscripts, circled run-on sentences, sipped coffee from a chipped mug. And she smiled more. Not because life was suddenly perfect, but because it was finally hers. One evening, Alex and Sophia sat across from Emily at a small cafe on the Lower East Side. No tension, no drama, just mutual understanding. Emily lifted her glass. To the past. Sophia smiled. And the versions of ourselves we left behind. They clinked. 3 people who'd played different roles in the same twisted production, now finally writing their own scripts. It's funny how much life can change when you stop waiting for someone else to validate your choices. A month had passed since the Whitmore wedding, and the wounds from the spectacle had healed. Jason was still trying to crawl back into the narrative, making public appearances, giving vague statements about self-reflection, but no one was listening anymore. Emily had moved on, and Alex was still wondering how it all happened so quickly. Sophia had always known he needed to let go of the old version of himself. She'd pushed him to step into the spotlight, but it was never about fame. It was about the freedom to finally be. For Alex, the transformation came in subtle moments. It wasn't about the magazine feature or the increasing number of design inquiries. It wasn't even the compliments from strangers who'd seen the wedding photos and whispered about his elegant demeanor. It was in the quiet mornings at the office, sitting with Sophia, discussing business not as a way to prove themselves, but as a way to grow their craft. They'd launched a new design project together, a small restaurant in Brooklyn, and for the first time, Alex didn't feel the need to prove it was going to be bigger or better than anything else. It just needed to be right. "I don't need to be the biggest designer," he told Sophia one evening as they brainstormed over blueprints. "I just want to create things that feel real." Sophia, sitting across from him, nodded slowly. "I get that. But you've always had the talent. What you needed was the right space to use it." He smiled. "And what's the right space for you?" She raised an eyebrow. "I think I'm still figuring that out. But I know it's not about trying to impress people anymore." Alex paused. "Yeah, I think I get that now too." Meanwhile, Emily was flourishing in her own way. The editing job at the indie publishing house was everything she didn't know she needed. The hours were flexible. The team was kind. And the books they worked on, mostly small-scale literary fiction, felt like a breath of fresh air after the suffocating world of socialites and image. One afternoon, she sat at her desk, rereading the manuscript of a novel she was working on. The protagonist was an ambitious woman who thought she wanted everything, until she realized what really mattered was peace, quiet, and being true to herself. "Sounds familiar," Emily murmured to herself. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sophia. "Alex said you're editing his next book. That's one hell of a plot twist." Emily smiled and typed back. "Only if he can handle a real critique." The banter felt good. They weren't fighting over who would come out on top anymore. They were friends. Allies. Two women who had learned the hard way that happiness didn't come from external validation, but from choosing themselves first. 2 months after the wedding, Alex found himself at a gala for a charity event he had almost forgotten he'd been invited to. He hadn't wanted to go. It was another of those over-the-top, shallow gatherings, full of people pretending to care about the cause while checking out each other's designer shoes. But then, there she was. Emily, standing by the refreshment table, a glass of champagne in hand. She looked different, not in the way she dressed or wore her hair, but in the way she held herself. There was no performance, no facade, just confidence in her own skin. For a moment, Alex froze. He hadn't seen her since the wedding, and she had been absent from his thoughts in the midst of his own whirlwind of new opportunities. But there she was, so uncomplicated. It felt like the world slowed down. He walked over, unsure of what to say. But when Emily turned to meet his gaze, she smiled, a real smile. Not one of those forced, polite smiles that felt like an obligation, but a smile that said, "I'm good. I'm really good." "Alex," she said softly. "It's been a while." "Yeah," he replied, his voice quieter than usual. "How have you been?" "Better," she said. "I'm better." They stood there for a moment, the noise of the party fading into the background. "I never thought I'd see you here," Alex said. Emily laughed. "I didn't either. But sometimes the right thing to do is show up, even when it's uncomfortable." Alex nodded. "You were right about a lot of things." She tilted her head, a little smile playing on her lips. "I don't want to sound dramatic, but I'm finally okay with who I am. And I'm not apologizing for it anymore." Alex's heart gave a little flutter, and for a second, he wondered if things had turned out differently. If he'd been less obsessed with control, would they have had a shot? But then he realized they had never been in competition. They were two people walking their separate paths, both learning what it meant to stand alone. Back at his office the next week, Alex looked at the pile of projects stacked on his desk. There was no rush, no panic. His phone buzzed with an email. A new client. A new opportunity. He could have pushed it, used the fame from the wedding, used the press. But for the first time, he didn't care to. It wasn't the fame he wanted, it was the work. And the peace. "Let's just see where it goes," he muttered to himself. Sophia walked into his office with a coffee in hand, a teasing grin on her face. "What's with the 'I'm not chasing anymore' vibe?" Alex shrugged, taking the coffee from her. "I'm done chasing." She stared at him, almost not believing it. Finally, as the weeks passed, the three of them, Alex, Sophia, and Emily, found a rhythm. Alex's design firm continued to grow, not because he was the loudest in the room, but because he was the most consistent. He took on projects he believed in, and his reputation, built on quality, not flash, spread. Sophia, in her quiet way, became the pulse of the operation. Her creativity and discipline were a steady balance to Alex's natural brilliance. Emily, free of the weight of her past, stepped into her own light. She became the voice behind some of the most powerful writers in the industry, all while finding her own peace without the need to be anyone's version of success. And they were all the better for it. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Alex had always believed that the hardest part was starting, getting your foot in the door, establishing yourself, and pushing through the initial awkwardness of being new in any environment. But now, as his firm gained more recognition, he realized the real challenge wasn't beginning. It was staying true. It was another one of those silent moments when Alex sat in his office, looking out over the city from his window. There were opportunities coming in faster than he could process them. The phone kept ringing. People wanted to meet. Clients wanted to sign. But the more success came his way, the more he questioned the reason behind it. It wasn't that the work was bad, or that he didn't appreciate the recognition. He did. But there was something unsettling about the way people now saw him, as if his identity had been reduced to just this. The successful architect. The guy from the wedding. The guy who had once been caught in a whirlwind of fame and now had a reputation to uphold. Alex had long stopped trying to impress anyone, but now he was beginning to feel the weight of other people's expectations. "What's my next move?" he thought aloud, tapping his fingers on his desk. It wasn't a rhetorical question. Alex was standing at a crossroads between his own vision and the world's vision of who he should be. Sophia watched Alex from across the room during one of their late-night design sessions. She could see the tension in his posture, the way he paused before answering calls, as though he were deciding whether to make his next move based on what he should do, not what he wanted to do. "You good?" Sophia asked, putting down her pencil and meeting his gaze. Alex sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I don't know. Everything's moving so fast. I feel like I'm trying to keep up with the image I built, but it's not what I want anymore." Sophia leaned back in her chair. "That's the problem, right? We start with a version of ourselves we think we need to be, but somewhere along the way, we forget who we really are. It's like you're wearing someone else's mask." Alex nodded, grateful for her honesty. "I thought I could manage it, but I feel like I'm losing myself in the process." "Maybe it's time to take off the mask," Sophia suggested. "Step back and figure out what really matters. You've been focused on building an empire for so long. Maybe it's time to start building yourself." Alex chuckled, though it wasn't a happy sound. "Easier said than done." Sophia gave him a pointed look. "You're Alex Kent. You know how to build things." Meanwhile, Emily's life was taking a new turn of its own. The indie publishing house had offered her a full-time position, and although she wasn't sure she was ready to leave the comfort of her freelance work, it was clear that it was an opportunity she couldn't ignore. It wasn't just the security of a steady income. It was the fact that the position gave her the chance to shape the kinds of stories that were published. She could finally push for books that spoke to the heart, that told real, unpolished stories. And yet, every time she sat down to make the decision, doubts crept in. She had gotten used to the freedom of choosing her own projects, of working on her own schedule. Would this new position mean compromising her values? Her creative independence? One evening, Emily sat on her small balcony, holding a mug of tea as she stared out at the lights of the city. The quiet was comforting, the sound of the distant traffic blending into the background. But inside, a storm raged. "You're not alone anymore," she whispered to herself. "You don't have to be afraid of the future." It was true. She'd built a life for herself that was centered around the things she loved, and she wasn't going to let fear make the decisions for her. The next day, Emily walked into the office of her indie publisher with a sense of calm she hadn't felt in weeks. There, she sat across from her boss, Nora, who was eager to discuss her new role. "I've been thinking about the job offer," Emily began, meeting Nora's gaze. "And I think I'm ready to take it. But there's one condition." Nora smiled, leaning back in her chair. "Go on." "I want to have a voice in the books we publish," Emily said, her voice steady. "I want to be more than just an editor. I want to help shape what stories we tell. I want to bring in new voices that haven't been heard." Nora nodded. "That's exactly what we need. You're exactly what we need." For the first time in a long time, Emily felt her heartbeat steady. She wasn't compromising her values. She wasn't giving up on what mattered. She was simply stepping into her power and owning her voice. Back in the office, Alex had finally made his choice. He wasn't going to let himself get lost in the noise anymore. He had a meeting scheduled with his PR team to discuss scaling back on the media blitz. It wasn't about quitting or retreating. It was about focusing. He knew the kind of work he wanted to do, the kind of spaces he wanted to create, the kind of people he wanted to collaborate with. It wasn't about fame or exposure. It was about creating real, lasting change in the world around him. Sophia was still there, standing by his side as they plotted out their next moves, But now, the conversation was less about how to get noticed and more about how to get real. "I think we need to start saying no," Sophia said one night as they closed up for the day. "There are too many distractions, too many things pulling us in different directions." Alex smiled. "Yeah, I think we do. But that's the real challenge, right? Learning how to say no when everything around us is saying yes." Sophia grinned. "Sounds like a good problem to have." The three of them, Alex, Sophia, and Emily, were no longer caught in the whirlwind of their past mistakes or the chaos of trying to keep up with the world's expectations. They had all learned to listen to their inner voices. They had learned the value of stepping away from the noise, even when it felt impossible. As the weeks went by, they each found themselves evolving. Alex learned to quiet the external demands and focus on his passion for design. Emily embraced the new opportunity, knowing she could make it her own. And Sophia, well, Sophia continued to be the voice of reason, always reminding them to keep their sights on what mattered. They were all still learning, still growing, but for the first time in a long while, they felt like they were finally on the right path. The truth was that none of them had expected things to turn out like this. Alex, Sophia, and Emily, once bound together by the spectacle of an extravagant wedding, now found themselves connected in more meaningful ways through growth, discovery, and self-reinvention. But even as they carved new paths for themselves, they all faced the inevitable truth: their pasts would always be a part of who they were. The difference now was that they could choose how to carry it. Alex stood on the balcony of his apartment, looking out at the city's skyline. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the buildings. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't preoccupied with what was next. He wasn't obsessed with achieving some impossible goal or wondering how he could outdo himself. No, this moment felt different. He wasn't chasing anything anymore. His mind wandered back to the wedding, to the way Jason had used him as a pawn, to how it had felt to have everything upended in front of the world. He could still remember the ache in his chest, the embarrassment, the frustration, the confusion. But in that moment, standing there, it no longer held the same weight. He had forgiven himself, and in doing so, he had let go of the guilt he had carried for far too long. Alex smiled to himself. He had learned that it wasn't the mistakes that defined him, but what he did afterward. It was the choices he made now, every single day, that would shape the person he was becoming. His phone buzzed, snapping him out of his reverie. He checked it and saw a message from Sophia. "Dinner tonight? I need to discuss something important." It was funny how, even now, after everything they had been through, the simple act of spending time together felt like a lifeline. He quickly typed back, "I'm in. See you at 7. Sophia had always been the calm in the storm, the one who helped Alex see things clearly when he was caught in the whirlwind of his own ambition. But now, as they both navigated their evolving careers, Sophia found herself grappling with her own set of challenges. She sat at her desk late one evening, a cup of tea growing cold beside her as she stared at the screen in front of her. Her design firm had taken off in unexpected ways, and while it was everything she had hoped for, it was also more than she had anticipated. Her phone lit up with a message from Alex. "Dinner tonight. I need your advice." She smiled at the simplicity of it. Alex had always known how to cut through the noise. He knew how to get to the heart of the matter. But for Sophia, the real question was this: how could she remain true to herself in a world that constantly pushed for bigger, flashier, more? Was it possible to build something that mattered without getting lost in the pursuit of validation? Her thoughts drifted back to the wedding, to the way she had been caught up in the social ladder, the glitz, the glamour, and the feeling of being important in a world that constantly measured worth by appearances. But in the months since, she had realized that the only thing that truly mattered was the work, the real, meaningful work. Sophia texted Alex back. "I'll be there. Let's talk." Emily had come a long way since the chaotic days of Jason's wedding. The decision to accept the publishing job had been an easy one once she'd stopped overthinking it. Her new role had given her a sense of purpose she hadn't even realized was missing. But even more than that, Emily was beginning to understand her own worth. Not in the context of her relationships with others or the validation she sought from people like Jason, but as an individual who could stand on her own. She'd spent so long running away from her own insecurities, burying them beneath sarcasm and distractions. But now, Emily was learning how to embrace her imperfections and use them as strengths. Tonight, she was meeting Alex and Sophia for dinner at their favorite restaurant, a small Italian bistro in the heart of the city. She wasn't sure what to expect from the conversation, but one thing was certain: she wasn't the same person she had been the last time they'd gathered together. Her phone buzzed, a message from Sophia. "Dinner tonight? You in?" She didn't even hesitate before typing. "Of course. 7 works." The three of them gathered at the restaurant, the warmth of the soft lighting and the gentle hum of conversation around them offering a stark contrast to the chaos they had once known. Their conversations had always been laced with tension, with a constant undercurrent of competition, comparison, and confusion. But tonight felt different. Tonight, they weren't trying to prove anything. They weren't vying for validation or worrying about how the world saw them. They were simply 3 people, coming together, not as who they had been, but as who they were becoming. So, Alex said, breaking the silence as they sipped their wine. "I've been thinking a lot about what we've all been through, and about what comes next." Sophia raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What are you thinking?" Alex leaned back in his chair, his eyes thoughtful. "I think we've all been trying to outrun our pasts. But the truth is, we can't. The past is part of who we are. It's part of the story we tell. But it doesn't define us anymore." Emily nodded. It's easy to get lost in the idea of becoming something. But sometimes, the key is just to be. To embrace the process instead of chasing some ideal version of success. Sophia smiled, looking between them. "I think that's what we've all learned. The struggle isn't about who we were, but who we want to become. And we get to decide that." Alex raised his glass. "To becoming." The 3 of them clinked glasses, a silent agreement passing between them. The journey wasn't over. It would never be over. But for the first time, they were ready to face the future, unencumbered by the ghosts of their pasts, and with a clear vision of what they could be. As the weeks passed, each of them found themselves standing at the precipice of a new chapter in their lives. The journey they had started together, a journey full of mistakes, redemption, and self-discovery, was leading them to a place none of them had expected. For Alex, Sophia, and Emily, the true test had yet to come. The real question wasn't whether they could move forward. It was whether they could embrace the change they had worked so hard for, without being afraid to leave their old selves behind. Alex sat at his desk, a fresh set of architectural plans spread out in front of him. His firm had been gaining more traction, with clients now reaching out for more ambitious projects. But it wasn't just about the work. It was about something more personal. The past few months had forced him to confront the idea that his identity wasn't just tied to his success, his job, or his image. It had taken him this long to realize that the core of who he was separate from all of that. And now, with his new vision in mind, he was ready to put that into action. But that didn't make it any easier. "Are you sure about this?" Sophia's voice interrupted his thoughts. She had been watching him for the past few moments, her gaze steady. Alex glanced up at her, a mix of excitement and apprehension in his eyes. "I think it's time to make a change. The kind of work I've been doing, it's great. But it's not the kind of legacy I want to leave behind." Sophia studied him for a moment, leaning against the doorway. "You know what this means, right? It's not just about designing buildings anymore. It's about designing your life." Alex exhaled, pushing his glasses up his nose. "I've been living for other people's expectations for so long. It's time to live for myself." Sophia smiled softly. "It's a big step, but I know you'll make it work." Across the city, Emily was also contemplating a significant decision. Her role at the publishing house had been growing steadily, and she had quickly earned the respect of her colleagues. But with this newfound authority came new challenges and a responsibility she hadn't fully expected. The more she worked on curating the next list of titles for the upcoming season, the more Emily realized that she had a vision, one that involved elevating underrepresented voices and stories that had been buried beneath the surface for too long. She could feel the weight of the decision press down on her. Would she risk the stability of her new job to push for change? It was the same question she had asked herself all those months ago when she accepted the offer. Could she maintain her integrity while working within the constraints of a corporate world that often valued profit over purpose? Her phone buzzed with a message from Sophia. "Dinner tonight? Got something I need to run by you." Emily typed back quickly, her decision already half formed in her mind. Of course. 7 p.m. That evening, the three of them gathered at the familiar Italian bistro. The ambience was quiet, almost intimate, as they shared stories about their respective days. The usual pleasantries, however, soon gave way to deeper conversations. Alex spoke first, his voice calm but resolute. "I've decided to launch a new initiative at the firm, one that focuses on sustainable, purpose-driven designs. I'm talking about buildings that aren't just functional or pretty. I want to create spaces that foster real change, that encourage community growth." Sophia raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "That sounds amazing. But what's the catch?" Alex leaned in. "The catch is that it's going to be difficult. It's going to push us into uncharted territory. And honestly, I'm not sure if I'll make it work." Emily listened carefully, her gaze focused. It reminded her of her own struggle. "Sometimes you have to jump first and build the wings on the way down," she said softly. "It's not always going to be easy, but I believe in it. I believe in you." Alex smiled, grateful for her words. But the weight of the decision still hung in the air. This wasn't just about business, it was about personal growth. It was about taking risks that could change his future. Sophia hadn't shared much about her own struggles lately, but she was wrestling with her own dilemma. After months of successful projects, she had reached a turning point. Her firm was growing, but she knew that growth came with sacrifices. The question she faced was whether she could keep her identity intact while navigating the pressures of being a leader in an industry that often prized speed and volume over quality. "I've been thinking about what I want out of this business," Sophia said, breaking the silence. "The other day, I was looking at the numbers, and honestly, I don't know if I want to keep chasing the next big project, the next big deal. I've realized that my vision for this firm isn't just about profitability. It's about finding purpose in every project we take on. But I don't know if the world is ready for that." Alex nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. "It's a tough line to walk. But what I've learned is that you have to create your own path. You can't wait for the world to catch up with you. You have to move ahead of it, even if it's uncomfortable." Sophia sighed, looking out over the table. "I guess the question is, can I afford to take that risk? Can I afford to walk away from what I've built so far and still have a firm when it's all over?" Emily reached across the table, placing a hand on Sophia's. "I think you're already building it. You're not walking away from anything. You're building something better." Emily watched her friends, each of them grappling with their own fears, uncertainties, and ambitions. In a way, they were all facing the same fear, the fear of risking what they had built for something they believed in. But as the minutes ticked by, she realized that it was this very fear that made them strong. "We can do this," she said, her voice steady. "We've already done it once before, overcoming everything that tried to hold us back. The only thing we have to fear now is not taking the chance." Sophia and Alex exchanged a look, the weight of Emily's words sinking in. For a moment, they were all silent, contemplating the enormity of the changes they were about to make. And then Alex spoke, a quiet resolve in his voice. "I'm ready for this. I'm ready to take the leap." Sophia nodded, her eyes clear. "So am I. It's time for a new direction." Emily smiled, feeling a sense of unity settle over them. And I'm right there with you. We'll do this together. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of laughter and conversation. The uncertainty that had clouded their lives for so long seemed to dissipate, replaced by a sense of purpose and clarity. They had no idea what the future held. They didn't know if their risks would pay off, or if they'd find themselves faced with more challenges than they could handle. But for the first time in a long while, they were ready to face whatever came next. The first step had been taken. Alex, Sophia, and Emily had all committed themselves to change, to growth, and to leaving behind the comfort of what they knew for the uncertain promise of something better. But as they quickly discovered, the path they were now on would not be without its trials. Their willingness to embrace change was about to be tested in ways they hadn't anticipated. Alex stood in front of a sleek, modern building under construction. His hands were buried deep in his pockets, and his eyes scanned the blueprints one last time. The project, his new initiative to create sustainable, purpose-driven buildings, had hit its first major hurdle. The investors who had initially shown interest in his vision were now wavering, uncertain about the financial risks that came with the long-term commitment to sustainability. It was the kind of challenge Alex had expected. After all, not everyone was willing to abandon short-term profit for long-term vision. But that didn't make it any easier. Alex, his partner, Raj, called out as he approached. "We've got a problem. The investors aren't on board with your proposal. They want to see quicker returns. They're not interested in your eco-friendly initiatives, if it means they'll have to wait longer." Alex exhaled, his shoulders tensing. "I knew this would happen. But I'm not backing down. I'm not going to compromise on what matters just to appease them. We'll find another way." Raj raised an eyebrow. "And what if we don't? What if you're putting everything on the line for an ideal that no one else believes in?" Alex's jaw tightened. "Then we'll build something they can't ignore. I didn't start this to fail, and I sure as hell didn't start it just to make a quick buck." Raj hesitated, his gaze shifting. "I admire the passion, but you need to be careful. You've got a lot on the line here. This could cost us everything." Alex looked out at the construction site once more, his resolve hardening. "Maybe it's time to gamble, but I'm betting on what I believe in." At the same time, Sophia was facing her own set of challenges. Her design firm had grown quickly, but with that growth came pressure. There were new clients, bigger projects, and more expectations, and while Sophia had always been able to handle stress, this felt different. She was now at a crossroads: continue expanding the firm in the traditional way, or take the risk of slowing down to focus on the quality of each individual project, which would require her to say no to lucrative but soul-draining contracts. It wasn't an easy choice. Money was tempting. The success she had worked so hard for was within her grasp, and yet it didn't feel quite as fulfilling anymore. As Sophia sat in her office, staring at a proposal in front of her, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Alex. "They're starting to pull back. We need to find a way to prove this will work." Sophia sighed and put her phone down. She was proud of Alex for sticking to his principles, but she also understood the weight of what they were both facing. The pressure to succeed was becoming harder to ignore. Her assistant knocked on the door, pulling her from her thoughts. "Sophia, we have a meeting in 15 minutes. The client's on their way." Sophia nodded, standing up. "Got it." As she walked out of her office, she felt a knot in her stomach. The meeting with the client was supposed to be routine, a simple review of the designs for a new luxury development project. But now, with everything weighing on her mind, she wondered if she could really keep doing this. Was this the kind of work she wanted to pour her heart into? Or was she just going through the motions? The client greeted her with a firm handshake, but Sophia's mind was elsewhere. She knew she had to make a decision soon. But what was the right choice? Stay the course and take the easy path to success, or step back and risk everything for something that truly mattered to her. Meanwhile, Emily was having a different kind of battle. The publishing world she had entered was filled with cutthroat competition, and while she had always prided herself on her ability to cut through the noise, she was beginning to feel the weight of compromise. The higher-ups at her publishing house wanted her to push certain books that weren't aligned with the mission she had set for herself, books that catered more to popular trends than to stories that needed to be told. It was hard for Emily not to feel frustrated. She had joined the company to help elevate voices that had been marginalized, to give people a platform who didn't have one before. But as the pressure mounted to conform to what would sell, Emily was finding it increasingly difficult to maintain that vision. Emily, her boss, Judith, said as she walked into her office, "We need to talk about the upcoming release list. We're looking at a shift toward celebrity memoirs. It's what's trending right now. It'll sell." Emily's heart sank. She had hoped Judith would be on board with her vision of focusing on diverse narratives. But the reality was clear. Judith was more interested in profit than purpose. "I understand," Emily said, forcing a smile. "I'll get started on it." Judith nodded and left the room. As soon as she was gone, Emily sat back in her chair, staring at the proposal on her desk. This wasn't the job she had envisioned. She didn't want to be another cog in the machine. She wanted to make a difference. But could she afford to take a stand when it might cost her everything she had worked for? The three of them were now at a crossroads. Alex, Sophia, and Emily had all taken a risk in choosing a path that was different from the one they had been on. They had dared to dream bigger, to push boundaries. But now they were being tested in ways they hadn't expected. Could they really stick to their convictions, even when it meant risking their success? Would they be able to turn back from the pressures of the world around them? As Alex faced the uncertainty of his venture, Sophia struggled to decide if she could balance growth with integrity, and Emily wrestled with whether she could stay true to her vision in an industry that seemed to value popularity over substance. Each of them found themselves wondering, had they made the right choice? Their futures were still unwritten. But one thing was clear. They had come too far to back down now. That night, the three of them met at their favorite bistro once again. As they sat down, they exchanged knowing glances. Each of them was carrying the weight of their decisions, but they also knew that they weren't alone in their struggles. They had each other, and that had to count for something. So Alex said, breaking the silence, "What's the verdict?" Sophia and Emily looked at each other before Sophia spoke first. "I'm not sure, but I think I'm going to turn down that project. I need to stay true to what I believe in." Emily nodded. "I'm with you. I'm going to push back against the celebrity memoirs. I have to trust that what I'm doing is right, even if it's not the easy path." Alex smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "We've got this. Whatever happens, we face it together." They clinked their glasses, the uncertainty still hanging in the air, but now tempered by a shared commitment to their goals. For the first time in a long while, they felt like they were moving forward. The decision had been made, but as the days passed, Alex, Sophia, and Emily soon realized that standing by their beliefs would come with consequences. They had dared to be different, to step away from the paths that everyone expected them to take, and now they had to face the fallout. For Alex, the immediate consequences were both personal and professional. The investors who had once shown interest in his sustainable design initiative were pulling back. He had expected some resistance, but the speed at which they retreated was still a blow to his confidence. His phone buzzed. It was Raj again. "We've got a meeting with a potential new client tomorrow. They're not asking for sustainability, they're asking for profit. We need to decide if we want to keep fighting for the vision or take this more traditional route. Your call." Alex stared at the message, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He could feel his resolve faltering, the temptation to take the easier road creeping in. The truth was, sustainable architecture wasn't always the most profitable. It wasn't always what people wanted, not yet, at least. But then he thought of the vision he had shared with Sophia and Emily. He thought of the project that had brought him here in the first place. The dream of creating spaces that could change lives, that could make a positive impact on the environment. Could he really turn his back on that now? The answer came to him as he stared at the blueprints spread across his desk. No, I can't. I won't. His finger hovered over the keyboard as he typed a reply to Raj. Tell them we'll pass. We're not compromising. It wasn't a comfortable decision. It wasn't the easy choice, but it was the right one. Sophia's decision to reject the luxury development project had come with its own set of complications. The client had been disappointed, to say the least, and there had been a lot of pressure from her partners to take on more high-profile contracts. Their success had always been tied to these kinds of projects, and to walk away from them now felt like a betrayal to some. Her phone rang, and she saw the name of her senior partner, Colin, on the screen. Hey, Colin, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Sophia, we need to talk, he said, his tone flat. We've had some concerns from the investors. We've noticed that your firm is shifting in a direction that's not exactly in line with the big money projects we've been known for. You've got the reputation to back up the high-end clients, but if you keep rejecting these lucrative deals, we might lose that edge. Sophia's stomach tightened. She had known this conversation was coming, but it didn't make it any easier. I understand your concern, she said, choosing her words carefully. But I've always believed in quality over quantity. If we continue to focus only on profit-driven work, we're going to burn out. We have to evolve, Colin. We can't just keep doing the same thing forever. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I get it, Sophia. But be careful. If this goes sideways, it's your reputation on the line, not just the firm's. She closed her eyes, trying to steady her breath. I'm aware of the risks, but I've made my decision. The call ended shortly after that. Sophia stared at her phone, unsure of what would come next. She had always prided herself on her ability to take risks, but now, with the stakes higher than ever, she wondered if she had made the right call. Could she lead her firm through this transition? Or would they be left in the dust? Emily's battle was perhaps the most personal. She had always prided herself on her ability to speak up for the underrepresented voices, to push for the stories that mattered. But now, with the pressure from her publishing house to focus on more marketable, celebrity-driven books, she was beginning to feel like an outsider in her own company. She sat in her office, the latest list of potential books for the next season laid out before her. Each title was more mainstream than the last. There were no new voices, no stories that spoke to the marginalized communities she had hoped to uplift. It felt like a betrayal. Emily picked up the phone and dialed Sophia's number. It rang a few times before Sophia picked up. Hey, Emily. What's up? I can't do it anymore, Emily said, her voice tight. I feel like I'm suffocating. Every decision I make, it's about what sells. I wanted to be part of something that stood for something more. But now, it's all about the bottom line. I can't just keep pretending that's okay. Sophia listened quietly before responding. I get it, Em. It's tough. But you've got to stick to your guns. You're doing something that matters, even if it's not the easiest road. You've always known what you want. Don't let them take that away from you. Emily's heart lifted at Sophia's words, but the fear still lingered. I don't know if I can keep doing this, Sophia. It feels like I'm fighting a battle I can't win. You're not alone in this, Sophia replied. None of us are. Remember why you started. And if you need to walk away, then walk away. But do it because it's what you believe is right. Emily nodded, the weight of the decision feeling slightly lighter. She wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was for sure, she couldn't keep sacrificing her values for the sake of convenience. Later that evening, the three of them met again at their usual spot. There was a tension in the air, a feeling of anticipation, of uncertainty. They had all made bold decisions, and now they would have to live with them. Alex sat first, his hands wrapped around a coffee cup. It's not easy, he said, looking at Sophia and Emily. But I feel like I'm doing the right thing, even if it means everything could fall apart. Sophia nodded. Same here. I've lost clients and I've lost support. But I have to believe that this is worth it. that in the long run, it'll all make sense. Emily looked at them both, a small smile playing on her lips. You know, when I first started, I thought it would be easy. I thought I'd be able to change everything overnight. But now I see it's more about persistence. It's about holding onto your beliefs, even when everything around you is telling you to let go. The three of them sat in silence for a moment, reflecting on the weight of their decisions. We can't predict what's going to happen, Alex said finally. But we're doing this because we believe in it. And that's enough. The waiter brought their food, but none of them ate right away. Instead, they just sat there, in the comfort of each other's company, ready to face whatever challenges were ahead. For the first time in a long while, they all felt like they were on the right path. The initial relief of making bold choices began to fade, and reality quickly set in. The future they had each envisioned was not coming to them easily. Alex, Sophia, and Emily found themselves facing the consequences of their decisions, and it became clearer than ever that their paths forward would not be smooth or simple. Each of them, however, was determined not to back down. Alex stood in the dimly lit conference room, staring at the faces of potential investors. The room was filled with tension, the kind of silence that made it hard to breathe. He had been here before, selling the dream, pitching the future. But now, the stakes were higher. His decision to refuse the more profitable, traditional route had left him with limited options, and he knew he had to prove his concept not just as an idea, but as a sustainable business model. The investors sat across from him, their faces unreadable. So, Alex, one of them, a stern-looking woman with glasses, said, "We're intrigued by the vision. Sustainability, green living, it's a compelling idea. But it's also risky. We need to know why this is worth the investment. Why should we put our money in a venture that could take years to show returns? And what guarantee do we have that you can actually pull this off?" Alex took a deep breath. This was his moment. "I can't promise that this will be easy," he began, his voice steady. "But I can promise that it's the future. The world is changing, and the way we build must change with it. We've seen the way traditional construction has ravaged the environment. That's not something we can ignore anymore. And when we do it right, when we make the investment upfront, we can create buildings that are not only eco-friendly but also cost-effective in the long term." He paused, allowing the words to sink in. "I'm not asking for blind faith, but I'm asking you to see the bigger picture." There was a long pause. The investors exchanged glances. Then one of them leaned forward. "We'll give you one chance, Alex," the man said, his voice low. "But if this doesn't pan out, you'll be on your own." Alex nodded, his heart pounding. It wasn't a definitive yes, but it was the chance he needed. He had a narrow window to prove himself, and he couldn't afford to waste it. Sophia's day was no less stressful. After turning down the lucrative development project, she had expected some backlash, but nothing quite like this. Her senior partners were not happy, and the pressure was building. They wanted results, and they wanted them quickly. Her decision to focus on smaller, more meaningful projects was admirable in theory, but now they were starting to doubt her ability to steer the firm through this transition. She was sitting in her office when Colin entered without knocking, a scowl on his face. "Sophia, we need to talk," he said. "This firm built its name on high-profile deals. You know that. We can't just pivot to smaller projects and expect everything to work out. You're losing clients, and you're risking the firm's reputation." Sophia felt the weight of his words. It wasn't what she wanted to hear, but it was what she knew was coming. "I'm not abandoning the firm's success," Sophia said, her voice calm but firm. "What I'm doing is building a new kind of success, one that doesn't rely on the kind of development that harms the environment or leads to gentrification. I'm setting the foundation for a future where design can be both beautiful and ethical." Colin shook his head. "I understand your idealism, Sophia. But the world doesn't work that way. You can't change everything just by wishing it into existence." Sophia stood up, meeting his gaze. "I'm not wishing it into existence. I'm working for it. And I'm not going to stop just because it's hard. If you can't support that, then maybe it's time for us to rethink where this firm is headed. Colin didn't respond right away, but his silence was telling. He wasn't giving up on Sophia just yet, but his patience was clearly running thin. Emily had been feeling the strain of the publishing world's demands on her. Her decision to reject the celebrity-driven projects and push for books with real substance had earned her some pushback from her colleagues. The editorial team had grown increasingly frustrated with her, and some of the other editors were beginning to question her methods. But then, something unexpected happened. One morning, she was in the office going over the latest manuscript when her phone rang. It was an unknown number. She answered cautiously. "Hello. Hi, is this Emily Dawson?" a voice asked. "Yes, speaking. Who is this?" "This is Jenna Matthews. I'm an author, and I've been following your work for a while. I heard about the changes you're making at your publishing house, and I have a manuscript I'd like you to consider. It's a personal story about growing up in foster care, and I believe it's something that could really resonate with readers. Would you be willing to take a look?" Emily's heart skipped a beat. This was what she had been waiting for. A voice that had been ignored, a story that mattered. It wasn't glamorous or marketable in the traditional sense, but it was real. She felt a surge of excitement. "Yes, I'd love to see it. Please send it over." As soon as she hung up the phone, she couldn't stop smiling. This was the kind of work she had always wanted to champion. A book that mattered, that told a story of resilience and hardship. The kind of book that could change lives. That evening, the three of them gathered at their usual bistro again. They had all faced their own unique battles that day, and although the future remained uncertain, they knew one thing for sure: they couldn't stop now. Alex was the first to speak, breaking the silence. "I got an offer," he said. "A chance to prove myself. But it's risky. I have to deliver something big, something that proves the concept works." Sophia nodded. "I had a meeting with Colin today. He's not happy about the direction I'm taking, but I'm not backing down. If I have to fight for this, I will." Emily smiled, a small but confident smile. "I just got a manuscript from a new author. It's the kind of book I've been wanting to work on. It's not going to be easy, but I think it's worth it." The three of them sat in silence for a moment, letting the weight of their decisions settle in. "I don't know where this is going," Alex said finally. "But I do know that we're all in this together. And that makes all the difference." They clinked their glasses together, each of them facing an uncertain future, but with a renewed sense of purpose. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be quick. But they were ready for the challenge. They were ready to fight for what they believed in. The days following their decisions were filled with a kind of nervous anticipation. Alex, Sophia, and Emily had each committed to paths that felt more uncertain than ever. They were determined to see their vision through, but now they would have to face the consequences of those choices head-on. This was the real test. Alex's team had spent days working tirelessly on the proposal for his sustainable development project, but when the time came to present it, nothing felt right. The numbers weren't lining up, the materials weren't coming together as he'd hoped, and the pressure from the investors was growing by the hour. Alex paced in his office, staring at the blueprints. His mind kept circling back to the same thought: what if this doesn't work? What if I've overestimated the market for sustainable design? The phone rang. It was Raj, his business partner. "Alex," Raj's voice came through the phone, sharp and to the point. "We need to talk. The investors are starting to pull back. They're asking for results, not just ideas. We've put a lot of money into this, and we're not seeing the return we promised." Alex swallowed hard. "I know, Raj. I'm working on it. I won't let them down." "We don't have much time, Alex," Raj warned. "If we don't deliver something solid soon, we're going to lose everything we've built." Alex felt the weight of Raj's words, but he couldn't let go of the dream. Not now. He looked at the blueprints once again, determined to make it work. If this project failed, it wouldn't just be his career on the line, it would be the future of sustainable architecture. Sophia's situation was no less dire. Her firm had already lost a major client due to her refusal to accept a development project, and the pressure from the board was becoming unbearable. They wanted results, and they wanted them fast. Her refusal to buckle had cost her, and now she had to prove that the direction she was taking was worth it. She found herself standing in front of a group of potential clients at a high-end real estate conference. The room was filled with executives and investors who had only one thing on their minds: profit. They weren't interested in sustainable buildings or ethical design. They were interested in making money. Sophia cleared her throat and began her pitch, trying to hold onto her confidence. "We're offering a new approach," she started. "One that balances luxury with sustainability. Our designs incorporate not only cutting-edge technology, but also a deep respect for the environment. We want to create spaces that feel luxurious, but also make a positive impact on the world." She could see the skepticism in their eyes. It wasn't what they wanted to hear. One of the investors, a well-dressed man with a sharp suit, leaned forward. "That sounds great, Sophia, but our clients are looking for high returns, not a feel-good story. Can you guarantee us a return on investment that competes with the more traditional developments?" Sophia's mind raced. Could she really guarantee them anything? No, of course not. But she couldn't back down now. Not after everything she'd fought for. "We can guarantee that our approach is sustainable, that it will stand the test of time," Sophia said firmly. "But the return on investment won't come from short-term gains. It will come from the long-term value we're creating, something that lasts." The room fell silent. She could feel the doubt in the air. She wasn't sure if she'd convinced anyone, but she wasn't about to apologize for her vision. After the meeting ended, she walked out with a heavy heart. She hadn't secured the deal, but she hadn't lost herself either. Emily had been pushing hard to get her publishing house to take on more books from underrepresented authors. But her colleagues weren't exactly supportive. They weren't interested in stories that didn't fit into the mainstream mold. And now, the pressure was mounting. She needed to make a breakthrough, or she risked being marginalized in a company that valued profit over authenticity. She sat at her desk, reviewing her latest manuscript submission. It was a book about a young girl from a poor neighborhood, struggling to find her place in a world that didn't care about her. It wasn't a bestseller waiting to happen, but it had heart. It had meaning. Emily tapped her fingers against the edge of the desk. Her boss, Charles, had made it clear that the company wanted books with big names and guaranteed sales. He wasn't going to tolerate any more noble failures. The phone rang, and she saw Charles's name on the caller ID. She took a deep breath before answering. "Emily," Charles's voice was cold. "I've been going over your list of potential books, and I have to say, I'm not seeing the marketability we need. If we keep going down this road, we could end up with books no one will buy. We need a change in direction." Emily's heart sank, but she wasn't going to back down. "Charles, these books may not sell out immediately, but they represent something more. We have a responsibility to give a voice to people who are often ignored." Charles scoffed. "That's a nice sentiment, Emily, but this is a business. If you want to keep your job, you're going to have to show me results. Real results." The line went dead. Emily put the phone down, feeling more defeated than she had in a long time. But as she stared at the manuscript in front of her, something inside her clicked. She wasn't doing this for Charles. She wasn't doing it for anyone else. She was doing this for the stories that needed to be told. Later that evening, the three of them met once again, each carrying the weight of their struggles. They gathered at their usual bistro, the one place where they could still find solace amid the chaos of their lives. Alex was the first to speak. "The investors want results. They're starting to pull back, and I feel like I'm losing my grip. If this doesn't work out, I'm going to have to start over from scratch." Sophia took a deep breath. "I know what you mean. The clients want something they can sell quickly. But that's not what we're offering. And I'm starting to wonder if we're just banging our heads against the wall." Emily nodded, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. I had a talk with Charles today. He's giving me an ultimatum. Either I bring in the kind of books he wants, or I'm out. It's hard to not feel like I'm fighting a losing battle. There was a long pause as they all absorbed the weight of their words. Finally, Alex looked up at them, his eyes burning with determination. We've come this far. We can't stop now. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm not going to back down. We've got to keep pushing. All of us. Sophia smiled slightly. We're in this together, Alex. Let's see it through. Emily's voice was quiet but resolute. No matter how hard it gets, we're going to keep fighting. For the stories that matter, for the vision that means something. We've made it this far. We can't give up now. They clinked their glasses together, the weight of the world still hanging over them, but their resolve stronger than ever. The real test had only just begun. The days following their decision to stay true to their visions had been filled with uncertainty. But after weeks of pushing through the challenges, there was finally a shift in the air. The quiet victories, those small signs that perhaps their efforts weren't in vain, began to show up. They weren't out of the woods yet, but for the first time in a while, Alex, Sophia, and Emily had reason to believe they might make it through to the other side. Alex was sitting in his office, staring at the blueprint again. The weight of the upcoming presentation hung over him. But today, something was different. He had received a call that morning from a smaller tech startup interested in collaborating on his sustainable development project. At first, he had thought it was another dead-end lead. But when he read through the email from the CEO, his heart skipped a beat. The startup was focused on green technology, renewable energy solutions, smart materials, and efficiency systems. They believed in Alex's vision and wanted to partner with him on his current project. They saw the potential in his ideas and were willing to provide both financial and technical support. Alex had to read the email twice before it fully sank in. He wasn't just getting an opportunity to prove himself anymore. He was getting a chance to accelerate his project with real backing. This wasn't just a vague promise from investors anymore. It was an actionable opportunity. He could finally take that step forward into the future he envisioned. He quickly called Raj to share the news. Raj, you won't believe this, Alex said, practically breathless. I've got a tech company on board. They want to partner with us. They're excited about the sustainable designs and the potential for smart, green infrastructure. They believe in the long-term returns, not just the short-term gains. Raj's voice was cautious, but hopeful. That's big news, Alex. But don't get ahead of yourself. We still have to make sure this collaboration works out. A partnership sounds great, but it's only as good as the execution. Alex nodded, though Raj couldn't see it. I know, but this could be the turning point. I feel like we're on the right path now. Alex hung up the phone, excitement mixed with trepidation. There were still hurdles ahead, but for the first time in months, he could see a path to success. Maybe they had been right all along. Maybe their dreams of changing the world through sustainable design weren't as unrealistic as everyone had made them out to be. Sophia had been working tirelessly to turn her firm's focus toward more meaningful projects. The shift was difficult, and her ideas were met with resistance from many of her senior partners. But her dedication to her vision was paying off, slowly but surely. That day, she received a call from one of the smaller boutique hotels she had pitched her design ideas to. She had nearly forgotten about them, as it had been weeks since their initial meeting. But now, the manager was calling to confirm they wanted to move forward with her proposal. This is it, Sophia whispered to herself as she sat at her desk. I did it. The project wasn't as large or high-profile as the others her firm had worked on, but it was a step in the right direction. A hotel that prioritized sustainable design, energy efficiency, and the integration of natural elements. This was the future. And now, Sophia had the chance to show that this kind of design could work on a smaller scale. It was exactly what she had fought for. She picked up the phone and called Colin, her senior partner, to share the news. I got it, she said, her voice full of quiet triumph. They've agreed to move forward with the project. They're looking for something unique, something sustainable. And we're going to deliver. Colin was silent for a moment, and Sophia felt the tension in the air. She knew he hadn't been a fan of the direction she was pushing the firm, but she had a feeling that this was a victory that even he couldn't ignore. That's great news, Sophia, Colin finally said, sounding begrudgingly impressed. I'm not going to lie, it's not the kind of project we usually handle, but if it works out, it could be a game changer. Let's make sure everything is perfect. This could be the turning point we need. Sophia smiled, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. The project wasn't going to be easy, but it was the kind of project she believed in. And now, she had the chance to prove that her vision was worth fighting for. Emily had been sitting at her desk, reviewing the latest batch of manuscripts, when she received an email that stopped her in her tracks. It was from Jenna Matthews, the author who had contacted her weeks earlier about the manuscript based on her experience in foster care. Emily had read the first few chapters, and she had been completely captivated by the raw honesty and emotional depth of the story. It wasn't a bestseller in the making, but it was a book that needed to be told. The email subject read, "I'm ready. Let's make this happen." Jenna had agreed to sign a publishing contract. Emily couldn't believe it. The path to getting the book published wouldn't be simple, and it certainly wasn't going to be easy. But this was it, her first real step toward making the changes she wanted to see in the industry. She could feel her heart pounding as she composed the email back to Jenna, confirming the details and her excitement about moving forward. She hit send, then sat back in her chair, reflecting on the significance of this decision. She knew that the road ahead was full of obstacles, pushback from her colleagues, rejection from the public, criticism from industry leaders who only cared about profit. But she also knew this was her chance to do something that mattered. Her phone buzzed with a new message. It was Charles. "Emily," the text read, "I got word that you're planning to move forward with some of these smaller authors. I need a report by the end of the week with concrete evidence of how you'll make these projects profitable. I'm not sure you understand the gravity of this decision. Make it work, or else." Emily clenched her jaw. She knew what Charles wanted, but she also knew that her vision couldn't be contained by his limited perspective. It was time for her to take the lead on her own terms. That evening, the three of them gathered once more, the bistro becoming their regular place of refuge amidst the chaos. Alex was the first to speak, his voice filled with a mixture of excitement and caution. "I think we might actually have something here," he said, glancing at his phone. "This partnership with the tech startup could change everything. It's not a guarantee, but it's a step in the right direction." Sophia smiled, a small but genuine smile. "I got a hotel project. It's smaller, but it's the kind of project that could prove to the firm that sustainability isn't just a trend. It's the future." Emily, with a determined glint in her eye, added, "And I've got Jenna's book lined up for publication. It's not the easiest route, but it's the one I believe in." "We're making progress, even if it's slow." The three of them clinked their glasses together, the weight of their struggles still heavy, but now accompanied by a flicker of hope. This wasn't the end, but perhaps it was the beginning of something much bigger than they had ever imagined. The weeks after their respective victories were bittersweet. While they had all made significant strides in their careers, the stress of keeping everything together began to unravel parts of their lives. The choices they had made, the ones that had pushed them toward their dreams, were now beginning to test their limits. It wasn't just about proving their professional worth anymore. It was about surviving the pressure that came with chasing their dreams. Alex sat alone in his office, staring at the blueprints for the new sustainable housing development. It had been a week since the partnership with the tech startup had been finalized, but the excitement he had felt initially was beginning to wear off. The more he thought about the project, the more doubts crept in. What if it wasn't as solid as it seemed? What if the tech company wasn't as committed as they said? His mind kept spinning in circles, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something might go wrong. He was getting phone calls from Raj daily, each one more demanding than the last. "Alex, I need those projections. We're losing momentum here," Raj had said that morning. "We need concrete data. The investors are starting to question if this is really going to work." Alex's stomach churned as he tried to focus on the numbers in front of him. He had started this project with such hope, but now it felt like he was on the edge of a precipice, one small mistake away from falling. He ran his hands through his hair in frustration. He had no one to talk to. His friends were busy with their own struggles, and his partner Raj was too invested in the financial side of things to understand what Alex was truly going through. He thought about Sophia and Emily. They'd been such a source of strength for him in the past, but now, with his doubts clouding his judgment, he couldn't bring himself to burden them with his worries. As he stared at his computer screen, the phone buzzed with another message from Raj. This time, it was a list of demands for the next round of investor meetings. The pressure was suffocating. Alex picked up his phone and started typing a response, but then stopped. He stared at the message. His hands were trembling. When had his dream become a weight he could no longer carry? Sophia had spent the last few weeks pouring every ounce of energy into her new hotel project. She had been so focused on proving herself that she had barely noticed how distant she had become from her colleagues, particularly Colin. They had always had a rocky relationship, but now it felt like a chasm had opened between them. It wasn't just the project. It was the way the firm was starting to treat her. They'd taken a step back from some of her proposals, even the ones she had thought were the most promising. Sophia knew it was because she was pushing for sustainability, something that didn't fit into the firm's traditional luxury model. Colin had been quiet lately. He didn't ask her for updates as much anymore. And when they did speak, he didn't sound like the same mentor who had once believed in her potential. Instead, he seemed distant, his tone cold, as if he was silently warning her to stop pushing too hard. One evening, Sophia found herself sitting in the office, staring out at the city's skyline. She had stayed late to finish a presentation for a potential client, but her mind kept drifting back to the conversation she had overheard earlier in the day. Colin had been talking to another senior partner about her idealism. The words had stung, but Sophia had brushed them off. Yet, deep down, she knew the truth. Colin wasn't supporting her anymore. He wasn't on her side, and that hurt more than she cared to admit. The presentation went well, but as Sophia left the office that night, she couldn't shake the feeling that the firm was no longer her ally. She had always prided herself on her ability to stand firm in her beliefs, but now she wasn't so sure. The fear that had been bubbling up inside her for weeks was starting to surface. What if she was wrong? What if the firm was right and sustainability was just a passing trend? She didn't know the answer, but she did know one thing. She couldn't give up. Not now, not when she had come this far. Emily's days had become a blur of deadlines, emails, and meetings with authors. The book she had just signed was her first real victory, but now the weight of making it a success was starting to press down on her. Jenna's manuscript had been a huge step for Emily, but turning it into a bestseller was a whole other challenge. And if Jenna's book didn't do well, Emily knew that her credibility would take a major hit. Her boss, Charles, hadn't been pleased about the decision to take on lesser-known authors, and the tension between them was thickening. She could feel his eyes on her whenever they passed in the office, his disapproval as palpable as the air in the room. But the real problem wasn't Charles. The real problem was that Emily was starting to wonder if her desire to change the industry was naive. Could she really make a difference with the kind of books she was fighting for? Or was she setting herself up for failure by trying to champion causes that the mainstream world didn't care about? One evening, Emily found herself in her apartment, scrolling through social media. She saw posts about books that were flying off the shelves, books that didn't have the depth, the message, the heart that she was fighting for. They were selling because they were easy. And in a moment of weakness, Emily found herself questioning her decision. Her phone buzzed with a message from Jenna. Just finished the final draft. I'm so proud of this story. I know it's going to touch a lot of people. Emily's heart clenched. She knew Jenna was right. The story mattered. It wasn't the kind of book the world expected, but it was the kind of book the world needed. She couldn't let the pressure of the industry get to her now. But doubts still lingered. She texted back, trying to put her own fears aside. You're right, Jenna. This story is going to change lives. But deep inside, Emily wasn't sure if it would change hers. The three friends gathered once again at their usual bistro, but this time, the air between them was thick with tension. Alex was quiet, his usual bravado gone. Sophia was distracted, her thoughts far away. Emily was restless, glancing at her phone more often than usual. They shared their updates, but the conversation felt forced. The victories they had celebrated just days before now felt distant, overshadowed by the weight of what was to come. So, what now? Sophia asked, breaking the silence. Her voice was tinged with exhaustion. I'm not sure anymore, Alex admitted. I thought we were on the right track, but now, I'm not so sure. The pressure's getting to me. Sophia nodded, her own fears echoing in her mind. I feel the same. I've been working so hard, but it feels like I'm losing something. I don't know what's next. Emily took a deep breath. I get it. I've been doubting myself, too. I've signed authors who deserve a shot, but I can't help but wonder if I'm fighting a losing battle. They sat in silence for a moment, each of them feeling the weight of their dreams and their doubts pressing down on them. But then Alex spoke, his voice filled with quiet resolve. We can't back down now, he said. We've come this far. It's not about being perfect. It's about staying true to what we believe in. Sophia smiled faintly. You're right. We can't give up. Emily nodded. We've got this. We just have to keep going. And for the first time in weeks, the three of them believed it. The days had felt like weeks, and each one seemed to stretch further into the unknown. What had started as a series of small victories was now being tested by forces they hadn't anticipated. Just when Alex, Sophia, and Emily thought they had found their footing, the universe seemed determined to remind them how fragile their paths could be. The email came on a Monday morning. Alex had been sitting at his desk, preparing for the presentation that would solidify his project's next phase. His phone buzzed with an incoming message from the tech startup partner he had been so excited about. His heart raced as he opened it, hoping for confirmation. Instead, it was a cancellation. We regret to inform you that due to unforeseen financial constraints, we are unable to move forward with the partnership at this time. We appreciate your efforts and wish you the best of luck. Alex read the message again, then once more as if expecting the words to change. But they didn't. The dream he had been working toward for months, the partnership he thought would push his project into a new phase, had just evaporated in an instant. His first instinct was to call Raj, but the last thing he wanted was to admit that everything had just come crashing down. His mind was spinning. He'd poured his heart into this project. He had sacrificed time, energy, and relationships to get to this point. And now it all felt like a distant, unreachable goal. The more he thought about it, the worse it got. His phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Raj. Alex, we need to talk. The investors are pushing for results. I don't know how much longer we can keep them on board. Alex's hands trembled as he read it. He had no good news to share. What could he say? I've lost the partnership didn't seem like a phrase he could utter aloud, even to Raj, who was his most trusted ally in all of this. His office felt smaller as the reality of his failure began to sink in. He had always been able to keep pushing, but now he wasn't sure he could push any longer. Meanwhile, Sophia was dealing with her own set of challenges. Her hotel project had encountered unexpected delays. The client had requested major changes to the design, pushing the project's timeline back by several months. What had been a small win was beginning to feel like a drawn-out battle that wasn't worth fighting. But it wasn't just the project itself that was eating away at her. It was the constant tension she was feeling at the firm. She had tried to make her vision of sustainable design work, but the firm's leadership had made it clear they weren't willing to shift their focus. And with every passing day, it felt like the gap between her aspirations and their expectations grew wider. One afternoon, she met with Colin to discuss the setbacks on the hotel project. As expected, his response was blunt. "Sophia, you're pushing for things that aren't realistic for this market," he said, his voice colder than usual. "The clients want luxury, not sustainability." "I've told you this before. You can't keep insisting on this green design if it doesn't bring in the numbers." Sophia felt a sharp pang in her chest. She had heard this before, but this time it stung more than ever. She was fighting for something she believed in, and yet the firm, the people she had once respected, were telling her that her ideals weren't worth pursuing. "I'm doing this for a reason, Colin," she said, her voice tight with emotion. "This is the future of design. If we don't change now, we'll be left behind." But Colin's expression was unreadable. "Sophia, sometimes you need to let go of your idealism. The market doesn't care about ideals. It cares about what's profitable." The words hit her like a slap in the face. She had come so far, fought so hard. Was it all in vain? As she walked out of the meeting, Sophia felt the weight of his words pressing down on her. She had made her mark in the firm once, but now she was beginning to wonder if she had anything left to prove. Emily had been working tirelessly on Jenna's manuscript, but the pressure to succeed was beginning to suffocate her. Despite the initial excitement, the reality of publishing a book that wasn't a mainstream bestseller was starting to set in. Charles had been circling her every move, his eyes always watching, always critical. "Where's the data on Jenna's book?" he had asked her a week ago. "If this doesn't sell, you'll have to answer for it." That night, Emily sat at her desk, staring at the manuscript for the 1,000th time. She could see Jenna's story in her mind, could feel the power of the words on the page. But the fear was creeping in again. What if the world wasn't ready for a book like this? What if this was a mistake? She had poured everything into getting Jenna's story published, but now the weight of her choices felt unbearable. She hadn't even been able to connect with Alex or Sophia lately. They were both drowning in their own struggles, and it seemed like no one had time for each other anymore. Her phone buzzed with another message from Charles. "Emily, I need the final numbers on Jenna's book. If we don't get this right, we're pulling the project. Do not make me regret this decision." The words sent a chill down her spine. She had known this was coming, but hearing it out loud made it feel real. Emily had chosen a different path, one that wasn't about pleasing Charles, but now she was beginning to wonder if her faith in her choices was misplaced. What if Charles was right? What if this book, this author, this mission, were all just another mistake? That night, the three of them met at their usual spot, though this time, the air was thick with tension. None of them spoke immediately. Alex sat with his hands folded, staring down at the table, while Sophia stared blankly out the window. Emily's fingers drummed nervously on her phone. Finally, Alex broke the silence. "I lost the partnership," he said, his voice low. "The startup pulled out." Sophia's eyes widened, and Emily gasped. It wasn't just a setback, it was a blow to everything Alex had worked for. "I don't know what to do anymore," Alex continued, his voice cracking. "I thought I had it all figured out, but now I feel like everything is falling apart." Sophia nodded in understanding. "I get it," she said quietly. "The hotel project, it's not going the way I thought. The firm doesn't get what I'm trying to do. They want luxury, not sustainability. And Colin, he's not supporting me anymore. I feel like I'm fighting a losing battle." Emily looked between them, feeling the weight of their struggles. "I know. I've been doubting myself, too. I put everything into Jenna's book, and now it feels like I'm about to lose it all. Charles is on my back, and I can't shake the feeling that I've made the wrong choice." For a long moment, none of them spoke. The weight of their failures, their doubts, and their fears hung in the air. But then Alex lifted his head, meeting their eyes. "We can't give up now," he said, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. "We've come this far, and we've fought too hard. We're not going to let this break us." Sophia smiled weakly. "You're right. We can't let it end like this." Emily nodded. "We've got each other. That's all that matters." They clinked their glasses together, the weight of their shared burdens momentarily lightened by their resolve. It wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. The road ahead was no longer smooth. It had become jagged, full of uncertainties and hurdles they hadn't anticipated. But Alex, Sophia, and Emily weren't willing to let go of their dreams just yet. They had faced setbacks before, but this time, something inside them had changed. They knew that no matter how hard things got, they had to keep fighting. Alex had been staring at his phone for what felt like hours, scrolling through emails and news articles about the latest developments in sustainable construction. Nothing seemed to lift his spirits. The weight of his failed partnership was heavy, and it seemed like every effort to salvage the project was met with another wall of rejection. He had been avoiding calls from Raj for days now, unable to face the reality of his failure. But this time, he knew he couldn't keep running. He needed to face it, to confront the consequences of his mistakes head-on. The phone rang again, and Alex hesitated. He looked at the caller ID Raj. With a deep breath, he answered. "Alex," Raj's voice crackled through the line, "I know things are rough right now, but we can't just throw in the towel. You've built something solid here, and I think we can find another partner. We can still make this work." Alex felt a flicker of hope, though it was faint. But what if it doesn't? What if there's no one else out there who sees the value in what we're doing? There's always someone, Alex. Always. You've got a vision, and that's something rare. Let's find a way to get this off the ground again. The words hung in the air as Alex processed what Raj had said. Maybe Raj was right. Maybe this was just one of those bumps in the road. Something that was temporary but not insurmountable. "I'll start reaching out," Alex said, his voice more determined than it had been in days. "Thanks, Raj." I needed to hear that. He ended the call, a sense of renewed purpose starting to take root inside him. He wasn't going to let this failure define him. He would find a new path forward, one step at a time. Sophia had spent the past few days navigating through a fog of uncertainty. The firm's cold reception to her design ideas had shaken her more than she cared to admit. But something had shifted in her during that quiet moment in the office, when she had been contemplating her next move. She realized that she couldn't keep chasing approval from people who didn't see her vision. If the firm couldn't understand her, then maybe it was time to look elsewhere. That afternoon, she sat at her desk, flipping through a book on sustainable architecture. She had always believed in the power of eco-friendly designs, and now, more than ever, she felt that it was her calling. The firm might not have understood her, but the world needed this change. There were clients out there who cared about the planet, who wanted to build with the future in mind. Sophia smiled to herself as she realized the truth. She had spent so much time trying to fit into the mold the firm had set for her, but now she saw that she could create her own path. She picked up her phone and sent a message to a former colleague, a developer she had worked with on a smaller project years ago. He had always been passionate about sustainable buildings, and she knew he would be interested in collaborating on something bigger. "Hey, Jack," she typed, her fingers moving quickly. "I have a project idea I think you'd be perfect for. Let's talk." She hit send, her heart racing with excitement. This was it. She was taking control of her future. No more compromising her vision for others. It was time to make a real difference. Emily had been stuck in a cycle of second-guessing herself for weeks. Charles's constant pressure and the mounting doubt about Jenna's book had put her on edge. But one quiet evening, after a particularly tense call with her boss, she decided she couldn't let fear drive her decisions any longer. She knew that the path she was on was unconventional, but it was hers. And Jenna's book, no matter how much the industry doubted it, was worth fighting for. Emily had to believe that. The next morning, she stood in front of her mirror, a notebook in hand, writing down her thoughts. "It's not about numbers," she wrote. "It's about making a difference. It's about putting something real out into the world." Her phone buzzed with a message from Charles. "I need an update on Jenna's book, Emily. This is your last chance." Emily paused. She could feel the weight of his ultimatum pressing down on her, but she refused to let him dictate her decisions any longer. She put her phone down, took a deep breath, and made a bold choice. She called Jenna. "Hey, Jenna," Emily said, her voice steady. "I'm all in. I'm going to fight for this book. No matter what it takes, we're going to get it out there." Jenna's voice on the other end of the line was filled with surprise, then relief. "You mean it? You're not backing down?" "I'm not backing down," Emily said, her resolve firm. "We've got something real here, and I'm going to make sure the world sees it." For the first time in weeks, Emily felt the weight on her shoulders lighten. She wasn't alone in this. She had Jenna, and she had her own belief in the story. That was enough. The three friends met again at their favorite cafe, each of them carrying the weight of their individual struggles, but also a renewed sense of purpose. They had all been through their own personal battles, but now they saw a way forward. They had learned the hard way that the road to success wasn't always straight. It wasn't always easy, but the most important thing was to keep moving forward. "I called Raj," Alex said, breaking the silence. "We're going to try to find another partner for the project. It's not over yet." Sophia smiled, her eyes bright with newfound hope. "I reached out to Jack. I'm starting my own venture. It's time I do things my way." Emily beamed. "I called Jenna. We're going to make her book happen, no matter what." They clinked their glasses together, a shared sense of determination in the air. "We've got this," Alex said, his voice strong. "We've always had this," Sophia added. Emily nodded. "We just needed to believe in ourselves again." And for the first time in a long time, they all truly believed it. The days had blurred together for Alex, Sophia, and Emily. What started as a series of setbacks had transformed into a hard-fought journey, each of them moving forward not just for the sake of success, but for the promise of something more. They had reached a critical juncture in their lives, where everything they had fought for was finally coming to fruition. But as they neared the end of their long journey, they realized that the challenges they faced now were the ones that would define their futures. Alex stood in front of the conference room, his heart pounding in his chest. Today was the day. The new partnership, the one he had fought so hard to secure after losing the original deal, was finally ready to be solidified. His email inbox had been flooded with rejection letters, and the hours of cold calls to potential investors had been exhausting, but it had all led to this moment. A new partner had emerged. One who shared his vision for sustainable construction and innovative architecture. Across from him sat a group of investors, the same faces that had once dismissed his idea. They had seen something in him now, something he had struggled to find within himself. He took a deep breath, then presented his project with confidence, speaking not just from the business side, but from the heart. He had worked so hard to get here, and today it all mattered. "I believe in this project," Alex said, his voice steady. "It's more than just an idea. It's a solution. It's sustainable, it's innovative, and it's going to change the way we build." The investors exchanged glances. Then, one of them, the one who had been the most skeptical, looked back at Alex with a nod of approval. "We believe in it too," he said, offering a handshake. Alex smiled, his relief palpable. This was it. The partnership he had wanted so badly was now his, and he had earned it, every step of the way. Meanwhile, Sophia was sitting in a sleek, modern office, her laptop open in front of her. She had just received the final details from Jack, her former colleague who had become her business partner. Together, they had launched a small, independent firm dedicated to sustainable design, and already, they had secured their first project. The project was big. Really big. It was a high-rise building in the heart of the city, and Sophia's green designs were going to take center stage. This was her chance to prove that sustainability could be integrated into luxury developments, that the two were not mutually exclusive. She had always known this day would come, but now that it was here, it felt surreal. As she ran her fingers over the designs laid out in front of her, she thought back to everything she had gone through, the resistance from the firm, the doubts from her colleagues, and the constant pressure to conform. But here she was, standing on her own, about to revolutionize the way the city would look. "Congratulations, Sophia," Jack said, walking into her office with a proud smile. "You've made this happen." Sophia smiled, a sense of pride swelling in her chest. "No, we made this happen. Together." And she meant it. This was just the beginning. Her vision for sustainable design was no longer a dream. It was real, and it was changing the world. Emily stood in the small, cozy office that she had rented just a few months ago. It was cramped, with books piled high on shelves and papers scattered across the desk. But it was hers. And now it was home to Jenna's book, her voice, her story, which was about to be published. After weeks of rejection letters from big publishing houses, Emily had refused to give up. She had believed in Jenna's voice, in the importance of the story, and in the power of self-publishing. And now, Jenna's book was about to be distributed across multiple platforms, and early reviews had been overwhelmingly positive. Emily opened her inbox, where she found an email from Jenna herself. "I don't even know how to thank you," Jenna's message began. "I never thought this day would come. I was so sure no one would want to hear my story, but because of you, the world will." Emily's eyes welled up as she read those words. She had done it. She had fought for this, and it had paid off. Jenna's book was going to touch lives, just as Emily had always believed it would. Sitting back in her chair, Emily let out a deep breath. It was the first time in a long while that she felt truly at peace. She had taken the road less traveled, the one filled with doubts and fears, but it had led her here, to success, to fulfillment, and to a sense of pride she had never imagined. The three friends had promised each other that, no matter what happened, they would always celebrate their victories together. And so, on a warm evening in late spring, they gathered at their favorite cafe, the same place where they had shared their dreams and frustrations months ago. Alex, Sophia, and Emily exchanged knowing glances, smiles on their faces. They had come a long way since those early days when everything seemed uncertain and their futures unclear. Now, they were sitting on the other side of their struggles, victorious, proud, and stronger than ever. "To us," Alex said, raising his glass. "To us," Sophia and Emily echoed. As they clinked their glasses together, they knew that this was more than just a celebration of their individual successes. It was a testament to the power of resilience, of believing in themselves even when the world told them they couldn't. They had all fought for something bigger than just their careers. They had fought for their passions, their values, and their friendship. And now, they had it all. The world was full of challenges, of course. There would always be obstacles, always moments when doubt would creep in. But as Alex, Sophia, and Emily looked at each other, they realized that they had something most people never find: belief in themselves and each other. They had learned that setbacks didn't define them. What mattered was how they chose to rise after falling. As they left the cafe that night, laughter filling the air, they knew that whatever came next, they would face it together, ready to take on the world. And that was enough. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?